Hello, and welcome to the Health GoLive Webinar series. Today's episode is brought to you by your friends at IMO Health. We would like to remind you that the Q&A feature is available, so feel free to send in your questions and comments throughout today's webinar. We would love to hear from you. And with that, I will turn it over to venture partner Define Ventures, A.G. Breitenstein.
Hey folks, welcome. We're super happy to have you and this amazing panel. We're going to be talking about data quality in AI. People are very excited about what's going on in healthcare and the promise of AI, but I think all of us know that garbage in, garbage out. And so we're going to be talking about what we need to do with the garbage and how it is that we're going to address, I think, some really interesting and salient issues with the data and the information that we're putting into these LLMs. We've got a terrific panel here with a lot of diverse backgrounds. So I'm excited to just dive right in. We have Gayatri Narayan from ModMed, Ivana Nyami-Rod from IMO Health, Calum Yakubian from IQVIA, and Gigi Yoon from Cohere Health. I'm going to ask them to all do a quick little dive on their background so we can sort of get a sense of the experience and perspective that they bring to this super interesting question. And Gayatri, do you mind kicking us off? Think she's not on. Okay, we're waiting for her to join. So Gigi, I'm going to ask you to give us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depends on where you are. I'm the Chief Data and AI Officer with Cohere Health. Our primary focus is to improve the payer and provider collaborations using technology and AI. A little bit about myself. I've been doing data and AI for about 20 years. I started off as a junior level data scientist for my PhD program, getting put in front of a client, thinking about how to build custom solutions for the federal government. Back in the days, right, that's where all the data and funding was. Everything was custom built. Spent about 16 years in IBM, did IBM research, a lot of publications, and then by the time I left the company, I was a distinguished engineer in data science for the Watson Health. Before I joined Cohere, I spent a couple of years in Avidity, a clearinghouse company where I built up the data and AI team from scratch. So very excited to be here.
Amazing. Thank you, Gigi. Ivana?
Yes, hi. I'm Ivana Nyami-Rod. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at IMO Health. Have been with the company now for over 12 years. I oversee our product and development organization. And prior to IMO, was an engineer. So my background's in computer science and really solving hard problems with data. So this is a really exciting conversation for me today. A little bit about IMO Health. We're a clinical data intelligence company that really focuses on driving better data across the healthcare ecosystem. Our flagship product is our clinical interface terminology. It's been in the market for over 2 decades now, and it allows doctors to speak doctor at the point of care without worrying about downstream things like billing and reporting. And in recent years, we've expanded our portfolio to include more data quality solutions so that you can create better insights on top of your clinical data.
Amazing. Awesome. And Callum, you want to bring us up?
Sure, thank you very much. My name is Dr. Calum Yakubian. I'm a medical doctor by background and I trained and practiced in hospital medicine in the NHS in the UK. My accent wasn't a giveaway. And since 2020, I've been at IQVIA, where I now lead our healthcare strategy for a group called Applied AI Sciences. So for those who don't know, IQVIA is a global healthcare data sciences company and a leader in health data transformation. We curate over 120 billion records of healthcare data annually in order to support data-driven decision-making and improve patient outcomes. My focus is really at that intersection, I guess, of my background of AI and healthcare delivery. So really working with organizations to apply AI in a way in which they can get the better outcome from their patients when data is made actionable. So working with clients, for example, in clinical decision support around social determinants of health, or within the NHS, for example, working to de-identify all patient data to enable the kind of safe use of that data and sharing across organizations. So really excited to be here. I think the way that we approach data quality has changed a lot over the last few years, and this is a great panel to be a part of, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Fantastic. Gayatri.
Hi, sorry, my computer got stuck a little bit. Very excited to be here. Thank you, AG, for the great introduction. I'm the Vice President and General Manager for AI Scribe at Modernizing Medicine, which is a company basically that provides specialty-specific EHR and other solutions. I've been with ModMed for about 5 years, and prior to leading AI, I was leading ENT and allergy, a couple of specialties. Prior to that, I worked with Novartis Pharma as well as Thomson Reuters for many years, and I'm a certified accountant from India and an MBA from Columbia Business School. So really no technical background, but learned a lot over the course of years. Again, very excited to be here. I would like to mention that the views that I share are my own and do not necessarily reflect the views of my company. Thank you all.
Awesome. I'm super excited to dig in with you all. So let's start with sort of the outline of the problem. I go back in data analytics and data writ large back to 2008 with a company I founded called Humedica, and I used to joke that we had an entire floor of what I lovingly referred to as monkish scribes going through the data largely by hand to parse through EMR information and try to make sense of it, and it was non-trivial in the extreme, and that was in the world of machine learning and NLP, et cetera. I'd love for y'all to give us a flavor of where we are in the data quality journey, and then specifically, what are the issues raised in AI? When we go to this sort of net new instrumentality, what are the issues the same? Are they different? Are they the same plus new issues? Are they entirely different? What do we need to be thinking about at the highest level when we think about data quality? Anyone jump in?
Oh, wow. I would share, it's an interesting journey. Definitely the complexity has evolved, right? The early days, a lot of times when we do data science or AI, even with traditional analytics, it's more focused on structured data, right? We ask questions about, hey, how often is it a duplicate, or how often it is wrong or inconsistent, right? But I think as AI and just the availability of data has changed, the conversation has shifted to, yes, and do we have all the information we need to get the right context of the situation, right? There's a lot more contextual completeness conversation going on, right? To your point, AJ, right? Like, yes, we have the records of the patient in front of us, but is it the right one for the question we're trying to answer? And that tends to come up more and more often.
Yeah. I agree completely. I think the data that we're using has changed in its complexity. I think the biggest change has been, obviously, in the last couple of years, the democratization of AI. Like, when we were starting, we were working with highly specialist stakeholders who understood the challenges of data to a certain extent. They kind of had the battle scars, and they were kind of looking to AI to solve in some part. That was a relatively niche part of a healthcare organization. Now you have essentially anyone can in theory develop and deliver and execute an AI pilot really well, because the tools at our disposal are much higher. I think the questions and the pitfalls are the same in many ways as they were before, but now there's just a much larger kind of cohort of people who are experiencing them. I think probably the other thing to point out is, because of this democratization and the type of AI that we now have, it's not just data quality that's important, it's AI quality. In the past, if AI made mistakes, I guess in some way we could kind of figure out where those were coming from with, novel techniques around generative AI, around hallucinations. The quality of data being produced by the AI is now a question. And we have this really important task to ensure that not only the data in is not garbage, as you were saying, but actually the data out has kind of quality frameworks around it to ensure that it itself can be trusted, particularly, I think, in clinical applications.
Yeah, I was
put a pin in that because I want to dig more in that. Go ahead, Ivana.
No, I was just going to say, I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, especially in clinical use cases, really trusting that the output coming out of these models is accurate is paramount. I mean, and you see now the application of AI being used further away from the patient, but as we get closer and closer to being a fundamental part of patient care, really understanding the traceability and auditability of the decision that was made through the AI. So it is absolutely a part of making sure that the data is good, garbage in, garbage out, but that you have some knowledge, a knowledge layer, whether it's you're augmenting the AI or you're tuning the AI with some level of knowledge to validate the output in a way that can really trust what is coming out of it is critical.
Absolutely. I think a lot of you've covered some of the important aspects, which I was going to highlight. Wanted to also share some of the policy decisions that are coming out, right? There's 3 key areas that federal guidance have come out. One is the White House Bill of Rights. The second is the ONC's HDI-1 regulation, which is proposed. It's coming to effect actually end of the year, which is on predictive decision support, which is very critical in the AI, in our healthcare industry, right? In terms of ensuring that the predictions are sort of really accurate. And the last one is the FDA's plan to regulate AI-enabled medical devices. And all of these publications basically call for the same thing. It's quality of the underlying data, visibility of the user interface on what AI generates, and how to safely use AI features, and obviously protection of the data that powers the model. So as we continue to evolve in our AI journey, I only see more and more regulation coming in to sort of govern the intelligent use of the data.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm curious if you guys could illustrate this with some examples just to give the audience a flavor of kind of what are the gnarliest problems that each of you's come up against. If you can share them, you know, it'd be great to just give people a flavor for what we're up against here.
I can jump in.
Yeah, no, you go ahead. I could actually, the thing that really got me excited is what you share, right? How AI is generating data, and that data is going back to feed our AI training and decisioning process, right? So it's this virtuous cycle, and delineating what is the data generated by human versus AI or augmented AI. It's a key part of what we have to do in Cohere, because the way we need to delineate the noise from the signal, the signal from the noise is quite different technique, depending on how the data is being created. But go ahead, please. Yeah.
Yeah, and AG, your question just really got me getting some interesting memories there. So when we started to create our ModMed Scribe solution, we requested our providers to record their patient-provider conversation to help us train the model, which obviously we were going to take the conversation, de-identify the data, and then sort of use it for building. And once we started getting into the build mode and started listening to the audio, looking at the transcripts, most of the conversation was, how was your vacation in Hawaii? And oh my God, you have this spot there that looks not so good, but no clear indication of what was the diagnosis, what is the patient getting counseled on, more like, did you take the prescription that I prescribed last time? It's not something we can train the AI model on. So there was really the data quality you were talking about, and for us was just not there. So we had to go on a roadshow to educate our providers on how to speak. And almost we were like, remember, AI is blind. So assume there is nobody in the room actually watching what you do, and you have to sort of speak in a way that a blind person can understand what is going on. So back to you. That was one of the examples I thought I'll share.
Yeah, one of the examples for us, kind of similar use case, looking at clinical notes and really trying to extract entities so that it can be leveraged either for clinical decision support or even just to be a part of the medical record. You know, we often say at IMO Health that medicine is an art as much as it is a science. And so the data that a lot of these large language models train from are publicly accessible data, right? Whether it's the coding standards that they're getting from like a UMLS as an example, or the clinical data maybe that they're getting from bits and pieces of some of these institutions. It's not comprehensive, it's not consistent. And so when you're looking at, for example, a note around family history, and you're seeing a patient who's coming in for chest pain, if you miss something like this patient has a family history of heart disease, that could be really impactful in terms of how this particular physician treats the patient and what clinical decision support workflows get kicked off. Similarly, around reimbursement, we're seeing that a lot of out-of-the-box models will identify kind of simple ICD-10 terms or codes, but there's so much complexity in how a clinician documents, and you'll start seeing things like a diabetes mellitus type 2 getting identified, but they're not putting together the long-term insulin dependency and the chronic kidney disease. So you end up having 3 separate codes where you could have had a single bill that was, you know, double, triple the amount of reimbursement if you were to identify the term appropriately.
Yeah, you're preaching to the choir, and from my perspective. So like the majority of although I kind of cover more broadly I guess data interoperability, semantic enrichment and things. Now I started off my life outside of clinical medicine in NLP, and I've focused in that area a lot. So natural language processing, for those who aren't familiar. And I guess I forget I have become numbed almost to the craziness of what exists in doctors' medical records. So I guess I can say I am one. So I'm not mudslinging. I'm sure I've captured notes in a bad way in the past. But yeah, like clinical notes are incredibly rich in information, but incredibly complex. And a lot of the work that I have done, or that we have done in this space, has been for clinical decision support. And I think going back to the point earlier about trusting the output and how much can you trust the data that's coming out, I guess a nice example I can think of that, and I could think of many. So I mentioned social determinants at the top. It's an area that I'm really passionate about. One of our clients, a health system in Chicago, Endeavor Health, formerly North Shore, are doing a lot of work in trying to identify patients with social determinant needs. They've got programs in place to treat these patients, but they don't have the data to identify them because, unfortunately, as we all know, structured data exists primarily for billing purposes, not really for patient care. But clinicians capture social risk factors. So we're using NLP to extract kind of social determinants of health from the medical record and present it to social workers in the ED, who are then triaging, and they're managing. I think they're now spending 97% of their time giving treatment to patients who need it versus before where they were doing 60. But the NLP in the instance of when we deployed, whilst it performed very well, it made some silly errors that only AI can make. When AI makes mistakes, it makes mistakes that people wouldn't make. And that can increase a real trust barrier. But what I think is really important, what actually established trust for that particular health system, and I think for any clinician that I've ever worked with in this space, was that they were able to kind of see the mistake, understand the mistake, fix the mistake, and then the system, I guess, continued to perform or wouldn't make that mistake again, because it was an open box. They didn't like a black box philosophy. They liked being able to understand the AI as if it was a colleague. And so I think when I think about like the success of AI being applied in clinical decision support, that kind of transparency and trust is massive. No matter whether you're doing a very simple type of AI or a very complex type of AI, like without clinician trust and belief, then you'll never get adoption. And I think that's why I think I saw a report recently that 60% or something of AI or Gen AI pilots are being abandoned before they go to production. And I think a huge part of that is not actually being able to, develop the kind of the end user trust that you need to kind of make these AI algorithms actionable.
And Colin, let me follow up on this question of sort of the way doctors communicate. At least it's been my experience. I mean, first of all, I think it's its own language, right? It's its own professional discipline and language. I think also, at least in my experience, doctors get taught how to sort of subtly impart information without actually saying the information. Whether it's a complicated, quote, complicated patient or like other things. And I've worked in clinics where there were all kinds of weird codes, subtle codes in the notes about how to deal with certain patients or what have you. And I'm curious, as you think about just the way that doctors are trained, is it possible to get an LLM up to that level? And also, I think certain doctors also just code things for themselves, right? They have their own little shorthand that maybe not even, understandable to the doctor next door. So I'm curious, is the language that clinicians use just inherently more complex and different and really requiring sort of an extra layer or several extra layers in your mind?
I think that we are in a fortunate position in that we are in a position just now where we can combine LLMs with other techniques in order to get at that. So, doctors you can take the benefits of what you get with LLMs, and some of the benefits is what you get with, for example, terminologies and ontologies. So like if you can kind of make sure you're capturing clinically relevant and then grounded information by using clinical terminologies, and grounding means kind of like harnessing that LLM's output to some sort of source of truth. You're able to, I guess, embed a lot of clinical intelligence that off the shelf general purpose LLMs won't have. What LLMs are incredibly good at when it comes to information extraction, so extracting information from clinical records, is identifying things that you hadn't thought of previously and those patterns. They are very good at that. Now, they will not, if it's the first time they've ever seen an LLM has ever seen an acronym that it has never expanded before, it won't get it right. But if you're combining the kind of the language disambiguation, so I'm remembering from before you said no technical talk, and I'm falling into the trap of using, but yeah, all these times, but extracting the nuanced meaning of a sentence or what a clinician said, coupled with ways to kind of ground in medical intelligence, we're actually in this position where we can extract more information more accurately from free text data than ever before. And things that used to, would potentially have taken hours or days or longer previously, can now be done much more quickly. So I think it's super exciting being able to combine all of this huge toolkit of language modeling that has been around for 20 years that has kind of evolved with LLMs. I think there are obviously going to be challenges. Nothing will ever be perfect, but we're better positioned now than ever to kind of extract that information accurately.
That's great. That actually leads me to another question for Gigi. I'm curious, it's been a question in my mind, ontologies were developed to sort of create structure where none existed perhaps before. And one of the things that I've always been wondering with LLMs is, will they sort of overleap the need for ontologies? Will ontologies be sort of like interesting artifacts that they consume, but they end up with some sort of their own internal or external ontology, or will ontologies be necessary at all at some, hopefully short point in the future? Because I remember, trying to wrestle with them, just being like, really, we got to try to convey all of this information in the context of this like very arcane, very inflexible ontology. So I'm curious about your thoughts there.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I think the short of it is ontology is the way we organize concepts and our knowledge, right? So we either do it implicitly, it's going on in the head, or it's going on in the LLM machines, or we do it explicitly, right, where we supply it to the LLM. My true belief is really an iterative learning system. I believe ontology is going to also iteratively learn, right? As we interact with something like an LLM or any kind of AI, we love to ground it with clinical human knowledge. But as the LLM learn and evolve, we're building a system where we're then taking what we learn in the LLM to augment the non-ontology, right? So that learning system is almost clinical knowledge and data experience building upon each other. That's how I see it going in the long term. So.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And Gayatri, let me ask you in the scribing work that you're doing, and then I'm going to open this question up to everyone else. I'm really interested in the notion, these LLMs have an imagination. So they potentially can go A, B, and then, some Greek letter, right? And we don't necessarily always know how they get there. So I'm curious, as you've been sort of working in the scribing world, what does that pose in terms of new quality issues? And we talked a little bit about this, but I'd love, your world is so, as you sort of, you open the box on kind of what those conversations actually sound like, and then having to train the humans to do something else. And we know trying to train clinical people to do something different from what they ordinarily do is hard enough. But to try to do it in service of an AI is probably going to make people pretty crazy. So I'm curious how you have started to wrestle this problem to the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. So we all know, right? AI is only as good as the data inside of it. And the data quality basically comes from training the model with high volumes of high quality data, right? So you need both volumes of data as well as quality of data. And a lot of data in healthcare is unstructured, which inherently poses noise, right? Structured data is cleaner. Fortunately, at Modernizing Medicine, we, from 14 years since incorporation, all our data that we've captured is structured data. So right now we have 8 trillion parameters of structured data. All our visit notes are structured. So it's actually been a huge benefit to having in-house high quality structured data to actually train the model. So we have actually a patent, provisional patent pending on our approach of using our existing structured data to actually train the model.
Got it. Ivana, how have you tackled this problem?
Yeah, so kind of piggybacking onto the question before around ontologies. Obviously, we are at our core an ontology company, so content is a big part of how it drives innovation across our portfolio. And like Gigi was saying, we see AI continuing to help us evolve our ontology in such a rapid way that I think makes that ontology more and more critical to how at least we leverage that data to produce accurate output. Yeah, so similar to what Gayatri was saying, we've created an augmentation on top of foundational large language models that really help to leverage the ontology and validate the output from the large language model. That's kind of how we've done it. We've also used the ontology to tune the large language model. And one thing I know we haven't talked about yet is, the reality is these LLMs are very expensive too. And there's a lot of options now, which is great. But with those options come issues. And so what we've done is we've augmented, so we have this hybrid. We also have hybrid foundational models. So we're using 3 or 4 different ones. We have an R&D team set up that's just testing really every day the new things that are coming out and making sure that we stay on top of it and test with the use cases that we specifically leverage, and how even leveraging the prompt engineering using our ontology can help drive better output as well.
And I'm curious, and this is a company that I'm waiting to pitch us, which is like the company that is using AI specifically for data cleaning and normalization. I'm curious, have you guys started to use the LLMs to actually clean themselves, to use the AI to really start to be the data quality at scale? Because that was always the challenge, is the humans are great, but they don't scale well. And especially as the data gets really big, it compounds the problem. So I'm curious, have any of you started to use the tools to police themselves.
Yes, yes, absolutely. But again, with that validation step that is critical in making sure that it's doing what we expect it to do. But I mean, it's fundamentally changed our internal operations, our effectiveness, our ability to get to market with innovation so much faster. And of course, partnering with our vendor partners to ensure that they have similar solutions around their data quality as well.
Yeah, did you guys
That's an area that
I was gonna go back to the point about, large language model can be expensive, especially if you think through how to use it at scale to keep your data clean, right? And I love Ivana's point on the fact that, the hammer and nail analogy. In our experience in Cohere, we see that it's really a combination of traditional methods with large language models and anything in between, right? When you fine tune a small language model that does a really good job in addressing some of the idiosyncrasies of how MD writes, that turns out to be better performing than trying to flow the biggest machinery at it, right? So I do believe we're moving into an era of specialization, right? We generalize large language model, but we're going to move into an era where we specialize language models or machine learning models, or even traditional data science predictive model to solve the different angles of the data problem. And that's how you put together the tiger team, right? So in my head, I'm thinking I have a tiger, model team. So.
Yeah.
It's something. I mean, I think it's to be expected. We're all having very similar experiences, I think, across the panel. We, in our approach kind of just now, I think, to your question around, I mean, are you using LLMs to do that first pass of assessing the quality of an LLM's output? We have kind of developed, I think, similar to you, Ivana, we have an internal team who are all essentially working at the forefront of LLMs and ensuring that we're maintaining, currency or being current with the state of the art. I think that, to your point, Gigi, on the foundation models, I think the top performing foundation model for biomedical tasks or for tasks changes every 30 to 60 days. So the state of the art in this field is so fast that, anyone who is pinning themselves to one particular foundation model is going to be in a lot of trouble in 60 days time, or in 30 days time, or in 3 months. So we're doing a lot of actually like tool development in LLM trustworthiness, and then almost like a benchmarking framework. So lots of our clients, I guess, are coming to us with challenges with data, which traditionally 5 years ago we would have solved exclusively with our off-the-shelf, say, NLP products, but increasingly we're combining that with these kind of toolkits for establishing, okay, well, your use case is this, you need to summarize information from claims documents in order to match them to the appropriate patients that you have. For your particular population, you could evaluate these 10 different off-the-shelf models from kind of smaller to larger and giving like a score of how accurate it is. And the reason for that approach is because in 6 months' time, something else will be there. And it may do everything better than what you're currently doing. And unless you're taking that approach now of being ready for change, then you're going to, your technology or your solution is going to be kind of outdated very quickly. So it is both exciting and challenging. But yeah, certainly, I think for all of us, the last couple of years has taken something that we were, I guess, kind of niche warriors in a very niche area of informatics to now everyone's asking. So that part of it is definitely fun.
That's great. So this is slightly off the topic of specific data quality, but I think it's on everyone's mind. So much of healthcare is mathematical, right? It's being able to synthesize the outcomes of studies and being able to look at risk curves and really understand as we go from the thinking around data quality, specifically around text. I'm curious what's on your mind for data quality when it comes to math, because that's going to be a whole other egg to crack, or maybe it's not, but I'm curious. I think I looked it up today, and ChatGPT is like an 8th grade or 9th grade or something like that math. So I'm curious, as you guys think about the vast amount of mathematical data that these things need to synthesize, and what are you thinking about there?
Did not have on my bingo ticket of questions a question about about math. So thank you for taking me back to high school. I'm going to answer it. I'm going to do that cheeky thing and answer it a slightly different way. Like, I think, but to the point of your question, so much of healthcare is mathematical.
Or should be, maybe.
I think what we're seeing, if you think like so many risk scores and predictive risk models, like whether you get this drug or that drug, this pathway, that pathway, is based on some simple math, or these algorithms. There are tons of them in healthcare. You know, clinicians access them online, they put in the patient's history, you get a mathematical risk factor, and then the decision is made. I think actually what we're seeing more of now is an approach that's not relying on those kind of traditional risk calculators, and more is relying on a much more, consuming much more patient data in order to make, I guess, more complex predictions, but much more highly accurate and personalized predictions. And I suppose the consumption of mathematical data and doing sums is less relevant, as opposed to like the appropriate use of, if you think of like a patient's blood pressure as a feature in their map of features that exist about that patient. So they're a smoker, they've got this blood pressure, this family history, this social history. So I'm not sure that being great at maths or ChatGPT not being able to answer 8th grade maths is a huge roadblock into the huge amounts of potential that the ability to predict kind of doesn't outweigh.
All right, I got it. What do you think? Gigi, you're smiling.
I know I'm smiling because you're talking to a person who did her PhD in operations research. I'm a strong believer in doing mathematical optimization. So I would say let's remember, right? We say LLM quickly, but it's a large language model, right? The intent is to help extract, summarize, and create, right, new language-based concepts. And it can be very complex, like a whole movie, or very simple answering a great question. So and the newest, innovation that come out, like O1, it does a really good job in explaining the reasoning behind the scene, and you get a lot more confidence how you get to the answer. But I still think that the nature of mathematical solutions can be better efficiently solved from a mathematical sense, right? There's a lot of amazing mathematical techniques that can be used. The question we should ask ourselves is, how do we put the two together? Right? There's this concept of like a large language model sandwich, right? How do we allow a business users or clinician being able to interact with this complex data? What goes on behind the scene may be mathematics, but how can we use something like a large language model to create that translation between the human thought process and the math? I think that's where the two can play well together. So
I love that answer. Ivana, Gayatri, any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, from our standpoint, we've been using risk management for building our product, right? That's really math driven. So sort of looking at each element of the structured data in terms of, am I audible?
You are.
Okay.
Yep.
Looking at each element of the structured data, and we ourselves have provided a risk score to it in terms of what is the acceptable risk accuracy level that makes us comfortable to go to market with. And we are holding ourselves to really very, very high standards, because this is healthcare. This is not another industry where we can afford a sort of a larger leeway. And there's also list management software that's available to actually constantly monitor the accuracy of your large language models, even not just in terms of accuracy, but also the demographics, right? Continuing to ensure that that's free from bias and it's representative of the United States. So there's a lot of elements for which math is at the background, specifically with respect to risk management. And we're taking it very, very seriously. We are also going to get certified by the ONC with our product by the end of the year well, basically the certification is that the product is safe, secure, and free from bias. And a lot of that involves sort of complex math at the background to ensure that we provide the level of accuracy.
The only other thing I would add, I mean, and maybe just doubling down on what Gigi had said, which is out of all the tools in the toolbox to solve hard math problems, I don't know if I would leverage an LLM to do so. I have also played around a little bit with 401, and I feel like there's some really interesting capabilities in terms of financial predictions and business related math that I think could be interesting and maybe the start of what's coming, but not something that we necessarily leverage for our clinical problems.
I have one technical question that I want to ask, the sort of fun question, but I'm curious from the group, for non-technical folks, for the sort of business leaders in clinical organizations, what should they be thinking about in your mind when it comes to thinking about the quality both of the data, but of the use and the sort of governance, let's call it, of the use of AI? People are very excited. They're, diving in. But I'm curious, as folks really in the meat of how these things are getting built, how would you counsel them? What would you tell them to be thinking about as they're sort of thinking about, the emergence of these in their organizations? Callum, you jumped off mute real quick.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I would say that they have to. They can't think of it in isolation. So data is part of, I guess, a paradigm in which you have the data. You have, well, at the center of everything should be your use case, and people forget that far too often, particularly with Gen AI. They just think Gen AI, I'm going to use something, but they forget that what's the use case. So you have a use case. Why are you striving for data quality? And then you have the data, you have the technology that you're going to use to improve the quality of that data. You have the people who are going to use that technology and be impacted in the processes that that data quality is going to impact on. And I always think I'm always, I guess, a little bit skewed within healthcare organizations, but you have to take account of all of those things together in order for anything that you do around data quality to have any impact on your organization. So if you spend X amount of dollars, let's just say you do an initiative, you spend it like $1 million to improve the accuracy of your cardiology data, and you're improving the capturing and the kind of the structuring and everything of your cardiology data. If you actually don't have processes that's going to feed into users are going to understand how to use the new system, you're going to never realize the value of that investment in your data quality. So I think from my perspective, where I've seen real success of like AI-driven data quality initiatives has been when the healthcare organization has kind of worked across that kind of diverse set of stakeholders, so that when you are landed with this new glorious, high quality data, it actually has an impact on your organization. So that would be my advice.
I love that. Ivana, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so this comes up often, I mean, because we typically sell into the provider landscape, and our typical persona that we talk to and really are our champion is the CMIO. And they are intimately aware with the data quality challenges and how solving those would significantly change the output of their team, the effectiveness of their ability to leverage that data for a number of use cases. But it's helping them create a story and a narrative for the rest of the executive team around what are the actual economic outcomes here of having quality data, and how can we actually improve what's happening. So actually, I paused at the beginning because I wanted to pull up, we have a client advisory council, which is largely comprised of CMIOs, CIOs. The number one focus area for that group is how to leverage AI to improve efficiency and reduce burnout. That's really where they are honed in. Obviously, ambient playing a big role in that. Second, around improving current tools for improving HCC scores. So that it's reimbursement and provider burnout. I would say that's kind of where they focus. The provider burnout's harder to quantify in terms of dollars. So it's helping them tell that story.
That's great. That's great. And I love the sort of greater organizational context. Gayatri, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, absolutely. I do believe that, jumping on to what Callum was also saying, it's very, very important to have governance and processes around how they evaluate the data. So when we think about practices, right, they're dealing with PHI. And if you start to use that data to data mine and not have controls in place in terms of ensuring that the data is de-identified or there's a governance process in terms of who has access to the data, there are a lot of potential for breach. So that is one important thing to keep in mind when we actually when our practices come to us saying, hey, how can we effectively use our data? Some of the steps that we take them through is in terms of first, how do you secure your data when you extract it? Who has access? What is the governance policy in terms of, let's say the data has to be sent out to an outside consultant, right? Who are the two completely different parties who have to sign off, verify the data is data identified before it gets sent off, like really basic stuff, but the basics are super, super important. So that's something we've played a very heavy role in terms of ensuring that the data governance is in place within our company as well as we work towards building our ambient listening solution, as well as some of the other AI solutions.
All right, Gigi.
I guess last but not least, let's just remember it's a journey. I guarantee you set a goal, you find your metrics, and you think you meet that set of goal, and then you realize there's another set of goals that you need to work through, right? Because use cases, as you mature, there's more and more use cases. The data quality may be good enough for one, but not for the other. So as you mine this gold, just know that it's gonna be messy. I think patience is key. Patience is key, and I appreciate we hosting this session and have such a variety of audience, right? It's easy for the folks focused on data and analytics and AI work to lost in the mix, but it's important for the overall organization to come together to say data quality is a priority, but it's a journey.
Yeah,
right? It'll take time.
No, I think you're exactly right about that. So I'm going to turn to some of the questions, and I apologize. I am not going to get to all of them. Just I want to be clear. We're not going to sort of clunk through, but one thing that came up is that the audience would love to hear some real world examples of things you folks have done at scale and deployed at scale. And I'm going to add that you're really excited about, and then what you did to ensure the data quality in that process, because you probably aren't going to be excited about it if the data quality wasn't good to begin with. So I'm going to try to answer a couple of questions at the same time. So Gauthran, I'm going to start with you. Can you just give us some examples on the ground?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I mentioned, we got really lucky having in-house structured data. And like I said, trillion parameters, we have about 500 million visit nodes that are structured. So for us, while data quality is paramount, we do have high quality data already in-house that we are de-identifying and building our ambient listening solution. So a whole bunch of our process has been about obviously keeping our costs low. So starting with a smaller data set in terms of training the model, understanding, and continuing to work on the quality of prompt engineering to ensure that the right the right outcomes that we are looking for. And we continue to, what we do is start with a lot smaller quantity, and as the data and the quality of the output continues to improve, and once we hit a point where we are very comfortable, we are actually pushing a large volume of data to take it to the next level. So really trying to also balance our costs, right? LLMs are not really inexpensive. So focusing initially on taking smaller quantities of test data and then moving on. So data quality for us has been a very, very positive differentiator.
Love that. Ivana, what are you excited about? What have you done on the ground, and how did quality fit into that?
Yeah, I keep coming back to the entity extraction use case. There's a number of recent solutions that we've developed to help customers really make sense of clinical notes. And we've seen significant improvement in where we were a year ago to where we are today, and the amount of customers that are leveraging that. So we have some ambient vendors that are using our solution, all the way down to computer assisted coding companies and actual provider organizations as well. So I think that's where we're really seeing the rubber meet the road. The other area that is a little bit more R&D for us is in life sciences, and using large language models in things like systematic literature review. So finding key concepts in millions of lit papers on a particular topic and being able to really assess and run some analytics against that. I'm excited about what's possible. I think if leveraged in the right way, AI will be a significant game changer for healthcare in this country. But I think we all need to band together and work collaboratively to solve it.
Yeah, agreed. Gigi, what are your thoughts?
I love that, band together. Oh, example on the ground. So many, right? But just last week, what we're doing Cohere, we bring in the clinical notes, and we need to determine the right information to decide if the patient can get auto-approved for a prior authorization request, right? That's one of our key solutions. Doing it quickly, accurately is so important. And the notion of the partnership with the clinical team and the AI technologist, right? Right, back in the days where we still have clinicians doing ground truth labeling, remember those days? It's still happening. Right? That doesn't go away, right? The ground truth, right? Who determines the ground truth doesn't go away, and that's when rubber meets the road, because clinician A and clinician B look at the same notes will have a different interpretation. The same doctor looking at today versus a month later may have a different interpretation of his or her own record. So as we try to define data quality, I think it has to come to a point of how do you effectively come to that consensus. And one thing that has really gave us a lot of mileage is try to balance the human labeling with on the ground learning. We observe how the clinician interact with the notes, and in a subtle way to learn from what will happen the label be. Just really help augment the ability to collect high quality data without too much human energy. So that's been a lot of fun.
You said something, and Callum, don't worry, I'm not going to forget you, but you said something that really triggered my thought process, because I think this question of will the AI be the final, authority versus sort of just continued augmentation of,
right,
let's call it the awareness landscape for the individual whose decision ultimately is A or B. As you think about the ability for the LLMs to bring more informational awareness to bear at the point of decision, whatever that is, that gets very exciting, because that's the kind of scale that somebody can't go through and in the moment go read 10 papers and synthesize an understanding of
exactly.
Of
I am very excited. I think we will get there. I do believe there's going to be a version of Gigi that I would trust enough to make 80% of my decisions. Yeah. Right. I think that's kind of the line we have to draw. Have you trained the system to reflect how you will make decisions, and what kind of decisions would you allocate to that machine?
At least to decide what to make for dinner, right?
Yeah. All the need for groceries, right? No, I think there are sufficient amount of repetitive work in the healthcare system that we can, we can make some small incremental impact over time.
Yeah. Yep. No, I have a very simple XY axis that I've been trying to push people over the years to adopt, which is just the impact and the complexity. And I'm like, look, we need to be pushing clinicians all the way out to the furthest boundary of impact and complexity, and we need to push everything else into the hands of technology. So Callum, I'm curious, as you think about sort of boots on the ground and where you guys have sort of gotten most excited about stuff you've done, give us a little hint, a little preview.
Yeah. So again, to the latter half of your question, I'm most excited about the prospects of multimodal AI, and I think I am fortunate in that I get to work across a broad range of different AI topics and kind of healthcare data. So boots in the ground example, I think I alluded earlier to this social determinants example, and to your point as well about working at the top of your license, you know, like letting social workers see patients who need their input rather than reading, you know, thousands of pages of medical records. We were one of our clients presented at HIMSS recently on a female patient who had come into the ED with some non-specific symptoms. The NLP, so this entity extraction from the medical records, identified that she had a history of being a victim of abuse and crime. That social worker then took a trauma-based approach of data that was otherwise hidden and would have completely been missed. The patient would have been sent home and referred that patient for PTSD counseling and for legal support. So that is, like, for me, as powerful an example of AI improving patient outcomes as I think I've heard at a person level. So that's real boots on the ground, rubber meets the road, and that's social workers freeing up 50% of their time to actually see patients because of AI. Another thing which I'm really excited about is, you know, broad privacy enhancing technology. I think like repeatable and accurate de-identification and safe re-identification risk assessment is so important now because everyone's trying to run LLMs on their data. And if you're not doing that in a safe, compliant, kind of expert determined way, I think some organizations are heading for trouble because it's, you know, I think privacy too often is an afterthought and should really always be the first thing you think about when you're coming to handling and doing anything with patient data. And then again, I really like the potential of stringing together different types of AI. So I agree. Ivana, you had an example, which was one I was going to mention, systematic literature review. So using rules-based NLP to kind of extract, say, relevant literature from the however many tens of millions of literature exists within PubMed or Medline or etc. And then generative AI to summarize that information within a systematic literature review is something that it's less what I work on, some of my colleagues do, but are working on with pharma organizations. So yeah, I think it's really exciting. I think there's so much potential, and as I say, looking forward, certainly the stringing together of these multiple different types of AI into kind of multimodal approaches is going to be massive. And yeah, there's a quote from the Lancet from 2019, so pre-generative AI, which said, and Gigi is picking up on what you were mentioning, and I wish I could remember this professor's name. He's an Italian professor, I forget his name, so it's not my words. But clinicians are not going to be replaced by AI, but clinicians who use AI are going to replace those who don't. And I think that is very much true. I think that's the future that we're heading for, and it's definitely an exciting one. And I wish these tools had been around when I was on the front line, but I'm glad to be on this side and working with our healthcare clients.
Yeah, it is a brave new world. Well, you guys have been amazing, and thank you for going with me on the journey today. You know, I think this is front and center on so many people, if not everyone's, you know, list of things to do in healthcare right now, and y'all are doing just amazing work. And you know, again, coming from the history that I've had with analytics and machine learning and all kinds of other stuff, it's really exciting to see what you're doing, and just couldn't be more. We're waiting with bated breath to see how things evolve, and you guys are leading the charge. So thank you to the panel, thank you to the people who attended and the questions you sent in, and everyone have a great day. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you to IMO Health and to everyone that joined us today. Please visit our website at community.hlth.com to catch up on all Health Go Live webinars. And join us in Las Vegas, October 20th through 23rd for Health 2024.